Then we have these guys, the good guys over here, saying, you know, these guys don't stand a chance if we don't intervene. And they have intervened. That intervention is the indigo children. The indigo children are hybridized gene code that, that involve the full coding that goes up. They're not just Adami imprint humans. They're not just Turinicium with the 12th strand. Some of them are Orifeme with 24 to 30 strand capacity. Some of them are Emerald Order. The indigos returning, the indigos coming into this race cycle where they normally would not belong, and the only reason they're being put here is because we're in big trouble if they don't come. This race will never again be able to reach its 12th strand if this evolutionary experiment isn't done now to give us back a real jump start in the gene code. You're not dealing with Turinicium souls incarnating here. You're dealing with Orifeme and Emerald Order souls incarnating here. What they are Elohai from Harmonic 4. These are avatars that are connected directly to their ascended master levels of consciousness. Some of them are Ekars. There are 3 types that we'll get into later after we come back from lunch. But these are not even what's considered human consciousness anymore. They're way back up the scale. They're incarnating avatars. It is the return of the Emerald Order that we are seeing in the indigo children. And there is one group of them that are having the hardest time of all. And these are the ones that are getting a lot of problems with the ADD and all sorts of behavioral issues. And they can be living demons sometimes. And this is why. Type 3, which we'll talk about later a little bit more with the other types. Type 3 indigo child is a very unique one. It's not just an Orifeme incarnating or an Emerald Order with the higher codes. It is an Orifeme avatar that has made an agreement with one of the races over here called the Nephilim. Okay, Nephilim pop up. Actually, they're running through these lines. They're also running through these lines. Nephilim were part human and part Anunnaki from the second seeding of our race down here. They were the giants that we talked about earlier. They, the giants came. There were books of the Bible written on this that were destroyed. They came down, they interbred here, and they created physical beings here that were giants. And a whole bunch of them were kicked off the planet because they were going to totally erode the gene code here, and they were going to totally take dominion over the planet. That was not the plan. It was not supposed to be an Anunnaki planet. They have their own. Stay off ours, So, anyway, the Nephilim have been stuck in their own evolution. They have an 11-strand capacity, which is better than the dark matrix, but they're still not plugged into their avatar, full avatar level of consciousness, their Christos, and they cannot finish transmuting beyond that point. So they're a bunch of D11 avatars stuck. Where are they going to go? They can either join with these guys and continue sucking energy from other life forms and planetary systems, or they can start to realize they got a problem. And yes, you may be some of the most intelligent intellectual beings in the universe, but you don't know how to feel anymore because you don't have the frequencies because you're missing the DNA. If you want to evolve, you need help. There are agreements being made all up and down here. Hybridization programs that will allow the ones who want to cross over from either the very dark or the middle dark back into the ascension codes. Type 3 indigo is a hybrid consciousness, not just gene code. It is 2 avatar identities in one body. They are literally 2 different families of consciousness. It's not just having, like, let's say with a walk-in, they're both out of the same family of consciousness, where you have one come in and raise the body for a little while, and that one ascends, and then you have the other one come in. They're all related. They have the same flash line coding. You're having 2 diametrically opposite flash line sequence coded beings coming into one manifest incarnation. It can create an extreme polarity problem, an extreme from one side to the other. You may be lucky and come out with an indigo that is absolutely angelic when it's a kid. It may turn into a person that has one of those diseases where they become raving lunatics when they're 60 years old because they get one of these diseases where they start to bark and all sorts of wild other stuff. The negative side will come out if these things aren't harmonized. The purpose for these type 3 indigos is to allow a new opportunity, a new race line of evolution for the Nephilim avatars who want to cross back over into the light to have a new race line they can evolve through. And at the same time, it's helping us because from all of our history that has been hidden for the last 200,000 years, where the Anunnaki came down and messed with the gene pool here, most of us have Anunnaki coding in us now, whether we want it or not. if we're going to evolve, some of us have so much Anunnaki coding that to get the 12th strand back, we need that intervention race too. By helping the Nephilim evolve, the Indigos are giving a place where the Nephilim and the human strains contaminated by Anunnaki can incarnate next into that form and start to clear out their codes and work out the polarity balances so they can then go into the Taurinicium imprint. What it will give the Nephilim is the ability to pick up that one extra strand. They have 11 strands. They'll be able to pick up the one extra strand. But their 11 strands are reversed. That fire letter sequence is turned around backwards. What this will do is turn it back around forward and give them the extra strand so they can finally ascend, hook up with the Rishi, and they're out of here. It will also help the humans whose gene code has been contaminated by the Anunnaki coding to do the same, piece by piece, lifetime by lifetime. But they come in with a huge burden of trying to balance the polarities of the universe within themselves. The Orifeme imprint is dominant, and that's the only way these avatars from the negative side get to come over. They have to agree to be in subservience to the little bit higher coded avatar coming in with the Orifeme. Now the Orifeme have much higher coding. They go from 24 up to 48 coding. That's the only level coding that would not get reversed itself by combining it with an 11-strand Nephilim. So you couldn't do it with a Taurinicium, a regular human. You had to go to the level above. Type 3 indigos, which are the predominant ones now. There's about 2,500,000 of them on planet right now. These are the ones that are having real problems with the energies, the chemical imbalances, the issues. They're here to resolve the polarity balances of the races. They have within them some of the highest avatar, and they have within them some of the most screwed up avatar. But they are avatars that are trying to balance that within themselves. Most of them will never become conscious of who they are on that level. They need help balancing the polarities. And we'll talk more about the other two types, which is much less scary. You know, I wasn't too thrilled to find out about type 3s. Like, oh no. You know, I've dealt with Nephilim before in other lifetimes in their pure form, and it was like, oh no, they're not quite as bad as draconian shark-type consciousness, but they don't feel. They can, like, kill you and observe that as a scientific analysis. Oh, interesting. It responded this way. They just don't feel what they did. And some humans carry this, too. They said, when I was asking, you know, the guardian matrices, they said that Jeffrey Dahmer was a type 3 indigo. He didn't do things to hurt people on purpose. He just had these urges that he had to fulfill, and it did something for him. He just couldn't get the concept of remorse because he couldn't get the concept of what he had done. That is a very characteristic sign of Nephilim consciousness. They came in here and mutated the heck out of our race and didn't even realize what the higher councils were mad at them. They didn't get it. You know, they're intelligent, but they don't feel the reality. You have this in an indigo body that's a type 3. And I'm going to be putting together a book on how to deal with the 3 different types of indigos. The other 2 are much more positive, and they're not as extreme. They don't have the negative, positive problems as much as these guys. But they have their own issues to deal with. We'll talk more about them after. But the important part of knowing about these things is without that framework, you're not going to understand indigo children. And without understanding indigo children, you're not going to understand what's happening here on the planet right now that affects everybody on this planet. We're going to be part of a very small group of people who actually get it, who actually have a clue as to what is going down here. And it's going to get stranger and stranger in the next couple of years because we're going through dimensional blend. More contact is going to be made. There's actually a possibility that as soon as by next year, the end of next year, you may have the Elohim crew with their ETs visiting. Staging a landing is possible. It's not decided yet. We have some pretty good spy matrices up there, so as far as, you know, finding out what they're going to do and when they're going to do it, we tend to be pretty current on the information. It's still an agenda that's possibly going to be done. It could get as weird as that, as early as next year. Imagine what that would look like. Imagine if all of a sudden you have the new president on TV saying, you know, interrupt this broadcast. Events of an incredible nature. The only thing I can compare it to is the incredible filmage they had from when the Hindenburg went down in history. You had that live broadcast of the guy in tears watching this thing explode in the sky. Well, it'll be kind of that level of intensity. The ships are landing. we are not alone. I can see the newscaster with a melodrama, and everybody glued to their TV sets. Oh my God, we're not alone. The scary part is, if that drama unfolds, it's not the guardians that are doing it. It's the middle ones that are coming out of the Elohim matrix that want to take human evolution away from 12-strand into the Anunnaki lines in order to quickly up-level the Anunnaki lines, even though it's at the expense of the humans. They're not trying to wipe us out. They're just inadvertently going to damage us more than they already did. What that scenario would look like if it unfolds is you would probably see simply one craft. And it would probably be done live on TV for effect, so everybody get it. And then there would be announcements as very human-looking visitors came off. They may be tall, taller than the average human. And they may be very blonde and very Nordic-looking. And if it happens to be those guys, they're from Nibiru. They're part of the Elohim Nephilim crew from Nibiru that messed with us all through our history and took out the books of the Bible, the other 12 that were supposed to be in there that told us how to ascend. And they will have names like Moses, Abraham, Jesus. And they will pretend, just like they did everywhere since 200,000 years ago, back again in 22,000 BC, they did it again. They will pretend they are our parents. You know that Bible you had? Well, we wrote it. You're our children. This is the line of BS they're planning to run here. If their agendas work well enough, if the planetary grid mechanics that we are working with aren't effective enough, quickly enough, where they still have the opening to get away with it, this is what they're trying to do. Do you know what they're already doing? They are manifesting images of religious figures floating down out of the sky. People have pictures of these. I think they're from Argentina or Brazil. I forget. Yes. And the people that are involved with this, I know a couple of these people, and I like them. I didn't have the heart to tell them that, I'm sorry, it's not Jesus, really. It happens to be a Palladian Nibiruan that's coming down as part of a holographic insert program. They're not our enemies, per se, but they're certainly not working in the best interest of us. They're like overprotective parents that decided they don't trust us enough to grow up, so they're not going to let us. That is not fair. That's why they are no longer members of the Guardian agendas. They're no longer members of the Guardian Alliance. So the whole indigo issue is attached to the whole UFO visitation issue, is attached to what is going to go down here in the next 10-year period. Are we going to see it live on TV? And most of everybody else is going to be sitting around going, oh, neat, Jesus is back, just like the Bible said. It's like, if it were that simple, I'd be thrilled. But it's not that simple. These are plans of deception. What it all comes down to is we have a 12-strand potential as the general populations here. This is an opportunity to get that back, get back the awareness and the history that goes with it, and get back the mechanics to put our DNA back together. In the meantime, if we have too much skepticism and don't move quickly enough, and say, I'm too busy, I have these things I have to do, I'll get to DNA later, I'll get to my evolution, maybe in 6 years or so. You just may find yourself as part of a mass program where all of a sudden there's human-looking beings, claiming to be our forefathers, interacting with society, particularly on the government levels, and you see this unity consciousness emerging, which unity consciousness in its true sense is fine. That's what we're aiming for. But you will see a pseudo-unity consciousness emerging, where if you don't buy the program, you become enemy of the state. If you don't buy the history that's going to involve a planet called Maldak, that's going to involve a twist on history they did in the Sumerian times, that changes real history the way it went down, makes them look like they came in and created us and took us from being apes and made us into humans. It's a whole false history that's coming out of the Nibiru matrix. This is what they did before. It's coming through channeling. You'll find it in channeling books. You'll find it on websites. There are certain, I won't name them right now, but there is a certain very large contact movement happening with a Syrian strain. They claim to be guardians and ascended masters and a few other things. They are very sweet, love, light oriented. They are these guys. But they're not identifying themselves as the same Nibiru ones. They're working several angles with several different groups of contactees. But it's all the same primary agenda behind it, which is kind of mutate us into more Anunnaki cloister lineages, up the Anunnaki lineage, and keep us under mind control for however long it takes to get the Anunnaki where they want them. That's not the original agenda here. This DNA here is called the Templar Sun DNA. When I was talking about the Nephilim from before, this is the configuration they have, that 11 strand, but it's reversed where the fire letters are reversed, so they no longer plug into each other. So they can't undergo cellular transmutation. They're blocked because your fire letters have to be in right sequence in order for one strand to plug into the next, antiparticle and particle diffuse progressively up the thing to de-densify your matter. They're stuck in time. When we're doing the hybridization with them, these are the ones that agreed from that middle matrix that said, okay. A long time ago when we made the decision to do these mutations down here, we see now it was a bad idea. Yeah, whoops. Help. They are asking for help. They're starting to at least to realize that what they did here, for one, was totally unfair to us, but it also inadvertently caused them a lot of problems too. They want to fix it. So they were given amnesty to the point where they're not under judgment, but they have to agree to work under the direction of one of the higher level Elohai families, the Orphim primarily. This is the matrix the Nephilim are coming in with. So when you have an indigo level 3, which was literally 2 avatars coming into one body, you will have the 24-strand matrix of the Orphim mixed with that, the 11-strand reverse matrix. Progressively, the 24 strands will begin to reverse the polarity on the fire letters there. They'll match up because they have a lot of similar coding, and it will turn the negatives back into positives. But this whole process of the Indigo 3 lifetime is going to be about balancing polarities, because they're literally manifesting through the gene code, and that will manifest through the consciousness and the biochemical nature of the brain. Because what science doesn't realize yet is they look at DNA, they look at chemical imbalances, they look at the chemicals in the body. They don't realize these are the translations, chemical translations and manifestations of that deeper imprint. That's what they are. When they see DNA, it's simply a chemical translation of the morphogenetic imprint that's held in the scalar sequences. So they're not going to be able to figure out at all what is happening with any of the indigo children, because there's a DNA thing happening here that's so far beyond what science is ready to deal with. They're going to be relatively useless in helping indigos. They're going to be totally useless in helping what's going to happen if those guys actually do have the audacity to land. They're already doing that. There's been landings, little private ones with little groups. Some happen out in Colorado, some happen in Arizona. Little isolated events that don't make it on the news, but you hear about them in the tabloids sometimes. A group in Arizona, makes breeding contracts with, ETs. Half of this stuff is nonsense. The other half isn't. That's what's scary. We're in a situation now in our society where we're being taught that what is reality is actually fiction, and we're being taught to live fiction. The reality of ET contact has been part of our history for 70 years. 70 years ago, there were contracts made. It wasn't Roswell, it was before that, with the Zeta races who are coming out of the Draconian matrix. Were made with the U.S. government and several other governments. These are literal contracts signed. The MJ-12 groups evolved out of that. You don't find this in our history books for some reason. Oh, by the way, when the Zetas came down and decided they wanted to hybridize, and the government gave permission for that, so they let them abduct people as long as they erased their memory so they wouldn't remember it, so they could get the gene code. That's what's been going on here. These poor people that have been having contact and being abducted and being terrified by thinking they're crazy and going to psychologists, and the psychologists are telling them they're crazy. These people aren't crazy. They're being messed with. All right? But at least they're not the only ones messing. There's also people who are contactees that are indigos, or they're going to be parents of indigos. Indigos come in by something called a Palladorian birthing contract. If you have an indigo child, you had a soul agreement, actually a Rishi-level agreement, to serve the role of parenting an indigo child here, which meant you would have to have certain accelerations in your own gene code, which means you would have at least, from the time you were a child, on the astral D4 level, direct contact with some of the guardian groups who would have been progressively through the astral body been activating the, portions of your DNA. So if you have indigo children, you have had contact. You just don't have the memory opened yet. So there's a lot to this story. If we can begin understanding it, we can begin positioning ourselves in a position of power to direct it in the best interest of everyone. Because we're not against Nephilim. we're not against draconians. But allowing them to come in, take over, and deny the evolutionary potential that belongs to humanity doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help them either, as the Nephilim are now finding all of these centuries and centuries later. They're finding that because they mutated us, they're stuck too. They could have got that 12th strand back. They could have had the ability to interact with us and create a race strain within a win-win situation that they would have evolved long ago already too. So they're realizing the error of the ways. The draconians are very far from realizing that. Now, I want to get into that's the matrix of the Nephilim that's being combined. What do we have next here? Okay. This is another, wow. When we get into the Palladian Nibiruans, it's called the Axios Sun matrix. It's another DNA configuration. This one belongs to a lot of the ones that would be involved with that stage landing. Okay, they're connected to the other guys, but these guys have an extra problem. It's called the Templar seal, and it was put on them for messes they created before, where they just were not allowed to go higher until they went back down and reincarnated over and over and over until they clean up the messes they made. And this is coming out of they're Nephilim, but they're the ones particularly associated with the Palladian Nibiruans. And if you look through things, this might be a good time to start checking out, like, what's on the websites, all right, ET contactees. Who's talking to what out there? You'll start to have an idea when you see who's talking to what that what is, and what agenda is behind what it's saying. Okay? These would be the guys that are most likely to make first contact and to pretend there are ancient, Noahs and people like that. So if we understand, this is about DNA. This is about race evolutionary agendas. This is not some fluff-headed New Age picture. This has been going on all along. We need to realize it. Put the next one in, please. All right. These really small ones, they're just making indication of the seals in the DNA, which are distortions that were put in on purpose to change the way it was supposed to work, to block certain things, to control how consciousness would evolve. Our DNA came in with a lot of different types of seals. Some of them are described in Voyager's Mente book, and it gets really confusing. I mean, there's a lot of things, and this changed this, and the consciousness did this instead of this because you changed that. It's like, it's a science. We tried to touch on some of it. This is called the Belil Sun matrix. It's a 10-strand matrix, and there's a whole big movement going on now. Usually the people that are working with the Tree of Life that has 10 Sephiroth. The Tree of Life, as anybody doing Cathara healing knows, is about the DNA and about the Cathara grid within the body and about how that evolves into ascension. The people that are working to help people with this DNA configuration, humans here with this DNA configuration, are working with the 10 tree. We're working in Cathara with the 12 tree because we're working to regenerate the 12-strand pattern. These guys with the 10 tree of life are working with this DNA matrix because there's a huge amount of humans on the planet right now who have this DNA matrix because of interactions with the Anunnaki races throughout our history from Sumerian times and before Sumerian times. So the Belil Sun matrix has a 10-strand capacity. Now there are ways through the Melchizedek ordinations that anybody can get transmission of the 12-strand pattern. And they will at least have it when they didn't have it at birth. It's a morphogenetic field transmission. This is what we do the ordinations for. They're not about church. They're about DNA and ascension. Okay? But the matrices involved with this are not being taught that that's an option, which again, Council feels is not fair. They should at least be able to be taught it's an option. It is felt with the matrices of Elohim that are connected to these guys too, that the consciousness isn't mature enough to handle itself. So they'll help them evolve, but this way, so they can still keep a rein on them. Now, if you look at some people on planet Earth and how absolutely wacky they can be and how cruel they can be, would you really want them running around in 3 harmonics of the universe? It's bad enough they're in 1 on 1 planet. So it's not a negative agenda, the ones that are working to, with the 10 tree. It's an agenda meant for a level of consciousness and a certain DNA matrix that will help them evolve to the point where they could handle themselves with the power that a 12-strand matrix will give them. They're the Belil Suns. They have a lot to do with going back in time to some of the Jeshua lines. In the Voyager's book, we talk about the Christ story in a very unique way. We talk about the 3 Christs, the guy who was crucified who wasn't even a Christ, he was a decoy, and the 2 who ascended. One was a 12th level avatar, one was a 9th level avatar. The 12th level avatar was out of the Elohai families, and the 9th level was out of the Elohim families. Okay, we talk a lot about that. There's Jeshua 9s and Jeshua 12s, we call them, and they're family lines that came down because each of them left progeny, and each of them, there are Christic lines here, 2 of them. The Jeshua 9s tend to have this. These are the guys that are going to get kind of suckered in by the story of the Palladian Nibiruans, because they were directly involved with creating this mutation in the first place. So there's so many agendas here that are happening simultaneously with the DNA. If you're aware of them, you can at least have a choice in which one you're going to buy into. You can at least say, well, if our potential is 12 strand, well, I think we should have the ability to have that potential back. That's why I'm here. That's why the Orpheum are here. That's why the Indigo children are here, to fulfill a promise that was made 550 million years ago with the Amente rescue mission. That was called the Covenant of Peleador, and the Ark of the Covenant referred to that. Okay, to seeding the races. About 248,000 years ago, during a period that was called the Temple Wars period, that again you won't find in your history books yet, there was another covenant made after a whole bunch of messes, and 2 seedings went down the tubes, and again the same forces were fighting, and that's why the 2 seedings went down the tubes before. There was an agreement made called the Emerald Covenant, where a group of the interstellar races from all the harmonics who decided they would help humanity, reaffirm their position on helping humanity to get the 12th strand back. They made a promise. And the Emerald Order were the ones who, ran the whole thing from the higher harmonics, the Elohai families. And there's huge groups of interstellar races involved with each agenda, including the Emerald Covenant. Once upon a time, the Elohim Matrix was a part of the Emerald Covenant. Once upon a time, the Jeshua 9s were a part of the Emerald Covenant. But they decided to take it more into the Anunnaki evolution, and they broke the Emerald Covenant. So they're no longer considered a guardian group in the terms of guarding your right to have your heritage back. All right, so if you understand a little bit about how DNA applies to the agendas that are going down now, you get this bigger picture of reality that's going on. You also start to realize that humans have ET gene lines in them now, because there's been hybridization going on periodically. So we all have something called a DNA substrand matrix pattern. We're connected to one of these, or some of these, or a couple of these. We'll all have some of this stellar coding in us, and we will be most susceptible to the information broadcast coming through the matrices that have the coding we have in our DNA. That's why the fact that you guys are in this room would probably imply you have the Elohai coding, because this is an Elohai transmission pattern, and you were drawn in and guided to be here by that frequency. There are the people, and there's a huge amount of them, they're going to be drawn into the Elohim matrix that have the Anunnaki distortions in the DNA. They're not being told about the other option available to them, and that's what's not fair. And guardian races are not going to intervene and wage war over it. It would just destroy the planet if they did that. But they are trying to make the option known, where if you do happen to have, from the J9 strains, if you happen to have Nephilim in your gene code, this is okay. It means the ascension process happens a little differently, and there's things that have to be done, but you can fix this. You don't have to go through another 2,000, 2 million years of evolution under somebody else's control to do it. So it's really just being aware. How much do you want to know? We feel that you throw it out there, and who wants to know will come. So we're doing that. All right, can we flip? Thanks. Do I need that one? All right, and the final one I was talking about, the draconian DNA matrix, it's called the Black Sun 10-strand reverse. They have 10-strand capacity, can pull in 10 dimensions of consciousness, cannot transmute form from one harmonic to another. But some of them, because they've crossed with some of the higher strains of the Elohai in various periods, can shapeshift to some degree. So you have dragons running around in human form. If you start seeing this is a phenomenon. I've had a number of people independently from all over different parts of the United States tell this one researcher who I know, who's like a researcher of UFO phenomena, I think I'm losing my mind, because this person that I've known all my life, I was looking at them one time, they turned around and they turned into a lizard. They literally stood there, and they were not a person anymore. They were a lizard, and then they turned back again, and I think they're going crazy. They're not going crazy. Not all human bodies have humans in them right now. And that's going to be a rude awakening. That doesn't mean you hate some people and love others. That means you got to realize we have a really multifaceted problem here. If you start to see weird stuff, like reptile faces popping out, even in etheric vision, where you just start to see reptiles inside certain people. You're identifying, your inner senses are picking up on this DNA matrix, the reptilian DNA matrix. They're most susceptible to being manipulated by the higher levels of the dark avatars. They can be fixed too, but their matrix doesn't tell them that. They're just they're given belief programs of blind subservience. Just follow this doctrine, you know. They don't teach them anything about their energy fields. They keep them dumb, so they can use them here. But they're still human. Everybody here on this planet, this is the redeeming factor, came out of the Adami imprint originally, which was the Turnisium, which was the Orifeme, which was the Emerald Order. Okay, we all still have a seed of that left. Even if you have a black sun matrix, it may take a while to reverse something like this, but it can be done if you know the option exists. Those people that have, human beings right now walking around with us, who have some portion of this or even all of this, there are literal race lines among us that have this DNA configuration. They don't know it. And it's a good thing it's not common knowledge, because everybody would be really trying to kill each other, pointing fingers at each other. You have a black sun matrix. It's not about that. Black sun matrices, Bolero matrices, all these DNA matrices can be fixed and restored. All it comes down to is understanding fire letter sequences and what fire letter sequences need to be repaired and reordered. When you're working with the Elohai councils, they know the mechanics of that. They have the programs, the original ones. And that's what they're bringing back here. That's what the indigos coming here are about. They're resetting in the grids, in the earth grids, in the race morphogenetic field, the original pattern of that first seed race in harmonic 4, and then in harmonic 3, the Anahazi, that everything else came out of. They're resetting that pattern here. So no matter what mess you have in the gene code at this point, you can plug in to the ascension codes and start getting your coding back, your flashline sequences back. That's the highest agenda working on the planet. Okay, we can go past that. All right, I think we showed that one before, yeah. That is the imprint, the 24th strand, and it's like 24 to 30 strand capacity of the Orifeme. That's not the Emerald Order Orifeme, that's the Orifeme. That would represent the matrix of indigo number 2. Type 2 indigos are incarnating ancient souls. They're not incarnating from here. Usually when you die here, you go up to about D4 frequency, reincarnate back down from D4. These guys are incarnating from the 24th to the 30th frequencies of consciousness. And they have to go through a whole interesting process to do that, to downstep into a body pattern down here. So type 2 indigos will have this DNA matrix. They are here on world service missions, and they are also here to help reset and hit critical mass of the right flashline sequences within the race morphogenetic field for the DNA, because if there's enough of them and there's a strong enough concentration of the right sequence patterns, it will flip over a lot of the mutations in the race morphogenetic field for the DNA. We're all connected through our morphogenetic fields, the scalar patterns. We're all part of the Earth's morph field, and we're all a part of the universal morph field. But when we bring it down to us as an individual, is connected to a collective, a family, is connected to a race, is connected to the planet. So they're coming in. Indigo 2s are coming in to give back the 12-strand pattern here by having double that. So every one counts as 2, as if there were 2 to reset that pattern. They're trying to hit critical mass. So the potential 12-strand is given back to this race before the other guys get a chance to hijack it again. All right, and then we'll get to level 3s now. All right. That is the Emerald Sun, 48-strand DNA matrix. And they're really beautiful. Like, like when you start to realize these are frequencies of consciousness, it's like filling out the frequencies. And when you see little scrawny suns, you realize you have limited consciousness. And when you have something that looks like that, you have 48 levels of consciousness, focused and aware. These beings have the potential to be awesome, but they can't come in with all of that activated, or they'd totally blow up a fetal pattern. It's a process getting into a fetal body with The Emerald Order Orifim, which are the ones that were the original Elohai, they're literal incarnations of the Elohai, not just avatars, but ascended masters levels. They come in from their non-manifest states in the ultra-terrestrial level, come down into the meta-terrestrial level, and progressively work their way down into where they can incarnate here in pieces, because you can't fit it all in a human body, it would blow it up. This is the potential they have. Now, the human imprint down here can't hold more than 12 dimensions of consciousness. With a matrix like this, or even the 24 pattern, they can open up to the avatar level, full 12-strand activation, and then they can access the rest of their consciousness. They can't fully embody it and focus it here, but they can move their consciousness up and pull information. They can read the whole 15-dimensional matrix and up to the Katic level. So they can pull very pure information. Now, these are the level 1 indigos. They come in usually not even so much just to help critical mass in the DNA for the 12-strand. They're coming in on planetary grid work projects. And very often their whole life is just about that. You know, they just kind of disassociate from other things. They're not as sociable as the type 2s. And they're not, the type 1 and 2 are not as rambunctious as type 3s, that have the polarity issues to deal with more. When they come in, they have the ability to awaken to be ascended masters. That doesn't mean they will. If the gene code doesn't activate properly within the right time frames, they won't be able to fully actualize their potential. That's where we come in. If we're aware of what's going on here and we start to create situations in our culture that will give them the framework they need to awaken quickly, they will be fine. They're here to make sure this planet doesn't go into pole shift between now and 2017. And they won't even be grown up by then. They're just here as an energy field. Because right now we have stargates opening, whether or not we believe in them yet. They're real. They're at the planetary core, and they're called the Halls of Amente. They haven't opened in 200,000 years, 210,000, 216 years. They are opening now. They will open in 2012, between 2012 and 2017 for a brief period of time. If that opening does not go properly, if the flashline sequences in the planetary grid are off, it will create pole tilt. And this is why the type 1s are coming in fleet. They can rebalance the planetary grids because they can hold the literal flashline sequences all the way up to the Akatic level if they're activated. They can reset that into the planetary grids to correct any planetary grid blockages that would create pole shift. When we do our trips to Egypt and Peru and these kind of things, this is what it's about. Unfortunately, I'm not going on vacation. I would love to. We're going there to run the frequency of these codes back into the planetary grid to make sure that as the vortice is open, which they are doing now, the 7 seals that they talked about in the Bible, seal 4 opens on 5/5/2000, May 5th. That's at Giza. We just recoded that manually because if we didn't, that would have begun the pole shift. There's a lot of channel groups that are talking about, yes, in 2003 the pole shift starts. That's when it would have started. All right. Correction. We recoded that one. Next is Peru. So what we're doing is the mission of the Emerald Order. It's very intense information. It's not baby level at all. We weren't supposed to have this information here for another 2,000 years. But the planet wasn't going to make it to that point. So this was the crash course, tell them as much as they can handle to get this grid work done. And they'll be okay. And that's what's being done. That's why I'm out here giving information. There's going to be more people like me talking about this as they start their awakening cycles. Okay? So when we're dealing with type 1s, we're dealing with this, the 48-strand Emerald Sun DNA matrix. And what's interesting about this matrix is to have that level of consciousness incarnate into a fetal pattern, it has to be done in 2 pieces. It has to be done through a walk-in process. And this is another thing that you go to a psychologist and again they think you're a split personality or you're nuts or whatever. You're not. A walk-in is a literal process where one soul starts the fetal pattern, does fetal integration, raises the body to a certain level, and then they have soul agreements that, okay, I'm done with what I needed to learn here, and this one didn't want to have to go into a body or couldn't go into a body until a certain age. They switch. They literally switch. One goes into ascension, pulls its fire letter sequences out, while the other puts theirs in, and it recodes the body. It's very precise. It's very tight wiring issues, and it's orchestrated from higher levels. All of the type 1s have to do the walk-in process, or they cannot activate to be the avatars and then the ascended masters that they are. If they don't undergo the walk-in process, they will be stunted into no more than a 12-strand activation level. And again, there's timing factors. Certain things have to happen by like age 12, certain things by age 22, certain by 33, and if they don't fulfill their potential. These are a group of children here that are here, and a group of adults too, that to finish what they intended by coming, they're going to have a whole different school system. They're going to have classes that teach them about their biofield, teach them about find who you are. You're somebody else, find it. You know, you're not just you when you look in the mirror. There's more to you. Find you. They need this assistance so they don't get in the brainwashing program that we're taught in public schools here. Or they will never be able to reach this potential, which means they won't get the grid work done. Which means this race may not have to worry about it after 2017. It's not baby games anymore. It's not a fear thing either. As long as we can accommodate what the indigos are here to do, it'll work out fine. We're scheduled to win this round. 200,000 years ago, the last time the stargates opened, we lost. It went into pole tilt then. And when things balanced again, the negative sides took over. Well, the negative ones and the middle grounds. And they've been fighting here ever since. And every time some of the Elo High families tried to come in, they would wipe out their information, bringing the Ascension teachings, and they would wipe out their populations whenever possible, too. We're in a unique position in history. And the indigos are leading the way. And if we help them, they'll lead us back to the victory of our own heritage. That's what it's about. And that's the level we need to understand. This is not small stuff. We need to build places where these indigo children and the parents that are going to be carrying them can go for safety, for shelter, for new understanding of what's happening here. So they can begin to activate, so they don't go into having to have Ritalin to control their behavior because their biofields are short-circuiting. Because even the ones with the high strand coding can have that problem too. Many of the type 3s are the autistic children. About 99% they said of autistic children are type 3s, where the negative one tried to take over the body and the orifeme shut it down. And it just won't. So it freezes the whole ability to communicate, and the outside personality just goes into terror. There's this war going on inside, and it can't even fathom what's happening to itself on a conscious level. So there are diseases. SIDS is another one, sudden infant death syndrome. This is mostly indigos, of all the types, where they get to a certain point in the fetal body and they realize they're not going to be able to activate the gene code the way they had intended. They're not going to be able to do what they came to do, so they leave, and they look for another body as quickly as possible. This is the thing science doesn't understand yet. I mean, they look at this, what's causing this horrible problem? Well, sometimes the horrible problem happens to be a choice by the soul that's trying to incarnate in there. And parents need to understand this, too. I'll save time for questions later, though. I just want to... Okay.
What I want to tell you is that they are also using the indigo in order to be hosts for indigos without them coming out into the world as human beings.
Right.
Yes.
You mean they're using him in overshadow?
You know, like a human being like me, for
yeah.
instance. I can be used as a host to have the indigo inside of me.
Yeah.
And it functions that way without coming out into...
Yeah, some of them will do overshadow. That's called overshadowing. And what that is, I've done this before in my incarnations. I haven't been in a full physical incarnation since Miriam's period back in the biblical days. But I have had numerous experiences of overshadowing one of the other souls in my soul matrix that incarnated. And she would go into fetal integration and get into the gene code, and I'd come down into the astral field and make the link between the astral field and the higher levels of consciousness. So she had her interior guidance system open, So I practiced for this life by doing that for a while. This time, I came in through this. I haven't activated all that yet. That's my potential, and if I keep wiping myself out with overwork like this, I'm never going to get it activated. It's not about ego. It's not about who's got a better gene code, It's about what did you as a high being, because we all are ascended masters. We all started there. What do we come to do here? We all came to do something. Now, with this gene code, the issues for children, it's an issue because walk-in can be a challenging experience. You'll also have bleed-through from a very early age between the experiences here and in the anti-particle universe because they have the coding open between them. So they get two sets of memories running concurrently. They may also be birthing in with much of the incarnational memory running before their eyes before they can even talk. They know they came from somewhere else, but they don't know what that means, and they get out here, try to understand, and they're hit with frameworks of reference They cannot explain them to themselves. That stunts their awakening process. It makes it very, very hard for the indigos to awaken. That's why many of you in this room may be indigos. You may be the type 1 indigos. You just never got to the point where you could understand what that meant or how to find it. Knowing this information may begin that opening for you, where you could start to feel it. Okay, I think I'm an indigo. Might I be 1, 2, or 3? You know? I'm going to do a book, not a 2-year publishing job book, but one of the spiral-bound ones specifically on very detailed how to spot these characteristics. If I try to do it in a short form and stick some little dinky things in the chart pack, there's some references there, but there are a lot of characteristics to look for with each of these types. I'm going to do a book. It's probably going to be for mail order for anybody who wants it within the next couple of months, that specifically how to handle the indigo situation. If you think you are one, if you know one, what to do for indigos in general, you know, what the kids that are spotted with different disorders. There are certain physical disorders that are very characteristic. Like these kind come in, often asthma. They come in with asthma as a baby. Oftentimes they come in as jaundiced infants with the yellowing of the skin, the liver's not functioning properly. Often they have spleen problems. There's all sorts of different things. The body's here, or the body patterns here that they get, that fetal imprint from the parents' imprint, is not quite ready to handle that level of frequency. So there are adjustment issues that come in with all of them. I'm going to do a detailed, rather than just try to throw it at you, oh, you know, this, and this, and you can spot one. It's not that easy. But once you see how the characteristics fall, you will be able to start walking around and you'll see these children. And that's when you're empowered to help them. They're all good. The ones even with the Nephilim. They have the real challenge because they don't get to activate all of their strand capacity. They're just here to have the capacity to reverse the negative Nephilim matrix. So they don't get the glory of being able to turn into 12th level avatars and, like, you know, go through portals. They're not going to reach that this life, and they're not supposed to, and that's okay. Some of them may die early. Some of them may get into drug abuse to numb themselves from the internal conflict. They need a lot of help and support, love, and nurturing is what they need.